Hello, juniors and seniors. Hope y'all are doing well. And hey, it's another day. We're going to make it, and hopefully, before long, we'll be back in school. That is the game plan, hopefully, and just continue to pray. I'm going to move quickly today and got several videos. Hopefully, you're watching this one first, and you'll have two other videos in your feed, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. But got a lot for just a little bit of time to cover. And want to start with the importance of midterm elections. We know that every 4 years in the United States, a president goes up for election or reelection. The presidency is vacated, so to speak, and a president is elected or reelected. And every 2 years, there are what are called midterm elections. Now, Reagan, of course, elected in 1980 and 1984, and during a lot of that time, he had a Republican Senate. And when you hold one of the houses, much like Trump holds the Senate right now, although half of them have coronavirus, and it's just Republicans, I don't get it. But anyway, when you hold one of the houses, it makes it easier to get legislation through. So if the president wants to do something, he can have at least one of the houses, and especially the Senate. It makes it a little better. But in 1986, for the midterm elections, the Democrats won. And so now, under Reagan, the last 2 years of his presidency, it's almost over, and the House and the Senate are controlled by Democrats. Now, do you think when they're coming up on an election year in 2 years, and this is how politics works, do you think that they want things to go well for Reagan his last 2 years? No, because they have an opportunity, they believe in 1988, to elect another president, a Democrat president. And so they're going to fight tooth and nail everything that Reagan puts forth to Congress, every suggestion he has. And one thing that we see is they are going to become kind of like the Adam Schiff type folks. They're going to look high and low for something wrong that Reagan has done. Now, your book talks about the Teflon president. Several presidents have been called this. Bill Clinton was called this as well, but Reagan probably the first one. Teflon used to make, and I don't know if they still do, I don't cook that much. I eat a lot, but I don't cook that much. They used to make frying pans or skillets out of Teflon. And you could put all kinds of stuff in there. It wouldn't stick to them. It was just a non-stick surface. And so they called him the Teflon president, that no accusations or wrongdoings would stick to him. That became his nickname. But they are going to dig for some stuff. And let me just explain this. And you're going to watch a video about this in just a moment, and it will do a great job explaining, and it has some graphics to go along with it. But to make a long story short, Iran is fighting Iraq. Okay, and we had some ties with Iran, partly because of or some care about Iran. We had hostages held by them, and you remember who was in control of Iran? The Ayatollah Khomeini. Ayatollah Khomeini. And so we want a less crazy leader in Iran, and so what we do is we want to see Iran win. It's not Corona, and I think I left my Lysol in the den instead of my studio. But anyway, we want Ayatollah was just a terrible, terrible, crazy leader, and we want someone different in there. So we want Iran to win, but on top of that, Lebanon is holding some of our hostages, and I believe we talked about that before spring break. They had a few of our hostages, and so Iran said, "Hey, if you sell us some arms, some guns, some ammunition, those type of things, then we will help get your hostages released." So we're not negotiating for hostages per se, but we're trying to get them released. And my goodness, if Americans are held hostage, we'll do anything that we can to get them released. So the Reagan administration, some players in the Reagan administration, agree, hey, we'll sell you these arms, you help get these hostages released, and here's the kicker. The money from the sale of the arms would be funneled through some bank accounts where you could launder it up a little bit and people couldn't figure out exactly where it was going. And we're going to send that money to Nicaraguan Contras. Now, the Nicaraguan Contras were fighting communism in Nicaragua. And we're going to send this money down there, and that way, hopefully, they can win that fight against the communists because, of course, America always stands up against communism. We love freedom. We love our rights, and we love capitalism. The problem with that was the Boland Amendment. Now, the Boland Amendment was passed after Reagan took office. The Boland Amendment was an amendment to the War Powers Act of 1973. Now, the War Powers Act of 1973 basically said that we could not, or the president could not, just willy-nilly send troops places. If they were there for a certain amount of time and whatnot, there was a criteria that had to be met. And if it was longer than that, it had to go before Congress. And the War Powers Act was basically to restrict the president's powers when it comes to sending troops. And the Boland Amendment basically said that you could not give aid to Contras. So, in a sense, Reagan has thwarted the law, or the Reagan administration has thwarted the law. And there's a paper in Beirut, a little underground paper, that has dug all of this stuff up, much like WikiLeaks today, if you're familiar with WikiLeaks. And they figure out all this is going on, they publicize it, and boom, Democrats start hearings left and right. Some of Reagan's administration, they were found guilty. Reagan, in the long run, takes responsibility for it. He says that what they did was wrong, but it was just a mess. And I remember, this shows you what a nerd I was, when the Iran-Contra hearings, and that's what it ended up being called, the Iran-Contra hearings in the Iran-Contra affair. When those were airing on television, guess who was watching? Because I'm a nerd. But, I mean, it was fascinating stuff. Oliver North, one of the big players, you may still see him from time to time on Fox News. But this was a big event in American history. And it kind of tainted the last 2 years of the Reagan administration. So that's one thing that you're going to watch a video on. And it is called What Was the Iran-Contra Affair? It's about 4.5 minutes long. It's from the History Channel. You'll see that link in your box. I'm trying to see my computer around my tripod here. The other one has to do with something, because tomorrow we're going to get into the Dukakis and the Bush election, and it's funny stuff. So we'll get into some of it, and you'll get to see a great video when Dukakis gets in a tank. If you want a good laugh, you will love it. You will absolutely love it. But one of the things that happens, and my book goes ahead and talks about it, the teacher's edition, is Tiananmen Square. Now, I do want you to read page 581 about the Iran-Contra affair, but stop when you get to page 582 when it says one more for the Gipper. You can stop there. And I do want you to read the little salmon color, little peach-colored square that says Reagan's challenge to Gorbachev. And if you want to, you can see this speech on YouTube. I didn't want to take up your time with it, but it's a great line. Read that if you will. But I want to talk about Tiananmen Square. We've talked about this several times in class, and it is here. It happened in 1989, right after Reagan was out of office. People start to see in China what the West is like, the freedom that they have. And so a group of students gathered in Tiananmen Square, and camera crews were covering the visit of Gorbachev to Beijing. They broadcast pictures of the democratic movement around the world. And so the Chinese dictator at the time decided to crush the movement. These students were protesting in the streets, and he ordered in the army with tanks and guns and everything. And thousands of demonstrators were killed. There was a photograph that you can watch a video on this too. It's on YouTube. There's a Chinese young man, student, that's standing in front of a tank, and he's standing up against a tank. The tank would move, the guy would move. I mean, amazing amazing strength that this young man had. By the way, no one's heard from the man since, but he at least survived initially. Some men rushed him off the scene as he's standing in front of this tank. Anyway, policemen tried to get the film of the foreign journalist who had been taking photographs of the incident, but before they could reach him, he hid the film in a toilet and surrendered a different role. And because of that, the world was able to see how the Chinese students resisted their communist government. So you're going to watch a video. It's called Tiananmen Square Protest 1989. Chinese soldiers open fire on civilians. It's about 4.5 minutes long. If you will watch those today and simply put done, D-O-N-E, not D-U-N-N or D-U-N, come on, D-O-N-E, in the comments section that you have accomplished all this, please watch the videos. They're very interesting, especially the Tiananmen Square one. About 2 minutes in is when it really gets interesting. They have a phone interview for the first couple of minutes. And then the Iran-Contra one, it will explain a lot about the Iran-Contra, where you'll understand it just a little bit better. But if you'll put done, and tomorrow we will talk about the election, presidential election of 1988, and we'll do some other activities as well. Hope you're doing well. Miss you, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.